Hello, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do my book haul for the month of November. It's a big one, so get ready. The good news is that most of these titles came from a used bookstore. I kind of went a little bit nuts because I traded in a lot of books and spent a lot of the credit that I earned. Most of the books that I got were only $1 at the used bookstore, but we'll get to those. First, two fun things that I got. Harold and the North Pole by Crockett Johnson. I did not know there were other books in the Harold and the I didn't know there was a Harold and the Purple Crayon series, but I love Harold and the Purple Crayon. So does my husband. So I got this for him and just wanted to show it. It's really cute. And now I feel like at some point I'm going to need to seek out the rest of the Harold and the Purple Crayon books. But this is a fun book. We have been keeping it on our Christmas display and fun to have around for the holidays, for sure. In other news, I talked about a cookbook in last month's book haul, which I will link down below, and mentioned that especially with lockdown and the pandemic still raging, we're looking at ways of bringing joy. A lot of that has to do with Christmas decorations and things, and we're really going to try to lean into fun Christmas baking and pies. And I got another book that ties in with that. It is The Book on Pie, Everything You Need to Know to Bake Perfect Pies by Jeanne McDowell. If you don't know Jeanne McDowell, I follow her on Instagram. She does a lot of recipe development, especially in terms of pies, for the New York Times, their cooking section, and she's all over their cooking Instagram channel. She does a lot of really beautiful things. If you ever saw last year, the New York Times did an apple ombre pie where the apples were sliced and different color apples were spread out across to create a kind of ombre pattern. She did that. That was her. And we've been a big fan, so of course we had to snatch this book up. It has so many really good ideas and delicious looking recipes. I can't even begin to tell you. I have actually already made one, and I had never made a pie before in my life. My husband helped me with the pie dough because I had to make a rough puff, and I had never done that. I'm a very loyal fan of the Great British Bake Off, but I had never actually done it myself. So I made croque monsieur pilots. I actually did the croque madame version. If you put an egg on it, it's a croque madame. So that's what I did. I did it, and it turned out really well. I'll put a picture up here. It was just delicious. It's certainly the best thing I have ever cooked. So if you're looking for a cookbook for the holidays, I really highly recommend The Book on Pie by Jeanne McDowell. She even has a really cute dog. And there's so many other recipes in here that I really can't wait to try. I just accidentally flipped past the one that I wanted to show you. Oh, there's a cranberry orange pie. And this blueberry lemon. Look at this. Blueberry lemon is one of my favorite flavor combinations. And look at that pie. Look at that. It's just gorgeous. It's beautiful. So I would highly recommend this book, especially if you're going to be spending a lot of time at home during the holidays like we are, and are looking for something that will bring some joy into your life. It's already brought joy into ours. So that is The Book on Pie by Jeanne McDowell. Let's get into the rest of the book haul. And we're going to start with a book whose title I'm not sure I can really say. I'm always a little bit afraid because a while ago, and I know I've told the story if you follow along, but a while ago I did a video talking about some books, and somehow someone flagged the video for language, so I temporarily had like a strike against me from YouTube. Managed to get it taken down because I didn't use any kind of profanity in the video, but I've always been really paranoid that it's going to happen again. So I'm not going to say the name of this book, but I will hold it up. I don't know if you can see it, but if you follow along, you know that I'm a huge fan of Alison Bechdel's graphic memoir, Fun Home. I'm less of a fan of the follow-up to Fun Home, which was Are You My Mother? But Fun Home is absolutely one of my favorite books. So previously, I had seen editions of this. This is the cult comic strip that she became famous for, and I'd seen editions of it, but they were really expensive. So I was always very curious, but never really took the leap and made a purchase. I happened to see on Fact and Fiction is a bookstore here in Missoula, and on their Instagram, they posted some LGBTQ books, and this was one of the books that they had in there. So I called them and said, hey, I saw your Instagram post yesterday. Just out of curiosity, how much is that collection? It's only $18.99. So I told them, please hold it for me. I ran in and I picked it up because I firmly believe if a bookstore stocks books that interest you, support the bookstore, support the publisher. This is put out by Mariner. and support the authors that you enjoy. And I've always been curious about this. So if you're unfamiliar with this series that I'm not going to actually say the name of, it is an addictive, wittily illustrated soap opera of the lives, loves, and politics of Mo, Lois, Sydney, Sparrow, Ginger, Stuart, Clarice, and the rest of a cast of unforgettable characters. Alison Bechdel brilliantly imagines a countercultural band of friends, most of them lesbians, living in a city that may be Minneapolis. It fuses high and low culture, from foreign policy to domestic routines, hot sex to postmodern theory, and a serial graphic narrative from 25 years of her beloved comic strip. It's basically, the comic strip is like a cult favorite, and I've always been really curious. I'm very happy that I have a copy of it. I usually read the first sentence of books, but for like Book on Pie it doesn't seem to make sense. But I will just say I'm really excited to have this at long last, and I'm very much looking forward to getting to it. The next book I actually pre-ordered from Montana Book Company, which is the t-shirt that I'm wearing today. They are a wonderful bookstore in Helena, Montana. And actually, so my husband and I had pre-ordered A Promised Land by Barack Obama from them. And then I called them and had them slip this in. I also found out about this from their Instagram page. They posted a photo of their holiday table, and Harold and the North Pole was on the table. So I called them and asked them to please slip this into the package with Barack Obama as a surprise for my husband. So follow bookstores on Instagram. You never know what you're going to find. That's my tip for the day. Anyway, it's Barack Obama. I feel like I'm biased to like this because I really like Barack and Michelle Obama a lot. He was not a perfect president. She was not a perfect first lady. Certainly better than what we've had the last 4 years. And people I do admire. And I really enjoyed Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, a lot. And I think from all the feedback, I think I'm really going to enjoy this as well. I have not read any of his other books. So the way we did this is we pre-ordered in a bookstore, and then Libro FM was doing a thing where if you could show your receipt for an independent bookstore, you would get a copy of a previous audiobook of Barack Obama's. So we selected Dreams of My Father. And so we have that available. I haven't gotten to it. Part of me is thinking I should try to seek this out on audio because I feel like him reading it is going to be amazing. But we have this, and I will probably be just doing it this way to get it in. This was selected by the New York Times as one of their top 10 books of 2020, which I did a reaction video to just yesterday. I will link that down below as well. And I'm really looking forward to this book. It's published by Crown, and basically it's not necessarily an autobiography or a memoir. If it's a memoir, it's really about his presidency and the decisions that he made and why he made them and the difficult demands of being a president and trying to do the right thing. And I believe this goes up to 2011, and then he has another volume that will be coming out, which will pick up from there and cover the rest of his presidency. And I'm really looking forward to it. Let's do, for a while I was only doing the first sentence and that's it. And I decided to do away with that. I think it was last month, and do a little bit more. So let's just see how much of this strikes us. Oh, that's a preface. Let's do the actual beginning. Part 1, The Bet. Of all the rooms and halls and landmarks that make up the White House and its grounds, it was the West Colonnade that I loved best. For 8 years, that walkway would frame my day, a minute-long open-air commute from home to office and back again. It was where each morning I felt the first slap of winter wind or pulse of summer heat, the place where I would gather my thoughts, ticking through the meetings that lay ahead, preparing arguments for skeptical members of Congress or anxious constituents, girding myself for this decision or that slow-rolling crisis. There you go. That is the beginning of A Promised Land by Barack Obama, which is out now. The next new book is Memorial by Bryan Washington. He's the author of Lot, which was a collection of short stories, and I admit I DNF'd Lot. I didn't finish it. I think I read the first maybe 4 stories in it, and I wasn't liking it very much, so I put it down. It had a lot of ideas, but I felt like there were some problems in it. But I told myself at that time that there was enough promise that I was looking forward to something else by Bryan Washington. And by all accounts, for all the feedback I've gotten on this so far is that this is a really good book. So I am looking forward to giving him another try. Let's do the plot description. Benson and Mike are 2 young guys who live together in Houston. Mike is a Japanese-American chef at a Mexican restaurant, and Benson a black daycare teacher, and they've been together for a few years, good years, but now they're not sure why they're still a couple. That there's the sex, sure, and the meals Mike cooks for Benson, and, well, they love each other. But when Mike finds out his estranged father is dying in Osaka, just as his acerbic mother, Mitsuko, arrives in Texas for a visit, Mike picks up and flies across the world to say goodbye. In Japan, he undergoes an extraordinary transformation, discovering the truth about his family and his past. Back home, Mitsuko and Benson are stuck living together as unconventional roommates, an absurd domestic situation that leads Benson to a deeper understanding of family and himself. Benson begins to push outward, realizing he might just know what he wants out of life and have the goods to get it. Both men will change in ways that will either make them stronger together or fracture everything they've ever known, and maybe they'll be okay in the end. And there you go. That is the premise of Memorial. I think it's interesting. There aren't a whole lot of stories about gay couples trying to make it work. And there's a fair amount now, but I'm glad to see another one out in the world. And I'm excited to hear more from Bryan Washington. By the way, this is published by Riverhead. Chapter 1. Mike's taking off for Osaka, but his mother's flying into Houston. Just for a few weeks, he says. Or maybe a couple of months, he says. But I need to go. The first thing I think is a curse word I can't say here. It's 4 letters and starts with the letter F. So it's just the way it is when you're afraid of angering the YouTube gods. So that's Memorial by Bryan Washington. I am looking forward to trying to get to this at some point next year in 2021, but I've heard really good things so far. That kind of concludes the new book portion of it, but now we start getting into the stuff that I got picked up at the used bookstore. The first one is The Weight of Night, a novel of suspense by Christie Carbo. I have not heard of her, but this used bookstore in town in Missoula, it's called the Book Exchange, has a table of books with local authors and things. And what I realized in a video I did recently is that I really don't know a lot of Montana authors. So I feel like that's something I need to do a little bit better on. And my husband was browsing the table and found this one and thought it sounded interesting. So we picked it up and I'll get to it at some point. So in this one, in a land sculpted by glaciers, the forest is burning. Thick smoke chokes the mountain air and casts an eerie glow over the peaks and vistas of Montana's Glacier National Park, which is a beautiful park, by the way, if you haven't been here. When firefighters are called in to dig fire breaks near the small town bordering the park, a crew member is shocked to unearth a shallow grave containing human remains. Park police officer Monty Harris is summoned to the site, but with an incendiary monster threatening to consume the town, he enlists Gretchen Larson, the county's lead crime scene investigator. While the two work frantically to determine the true identity of the victim, a teenager suddenly disappears from one of the campgrounds in Glacier. Could the cases somehow be connected? As chances for recovery of the missing boy grow slimmer and the FBI finds only dead ends, Gretchen and Monty race to fit all the pieces together with neither time nor the elements on their side. So it sounds interesting, and the local author, she seems to have a bunch of other books out. I was unfamiliar with her before, but I feel like I need to try to connect to some literature from my location a little bit better. So I'm happy to do that. Oh, it has a map of Glacier National Park. I love a book with a map, so already it's doing well. And the beginning of the book, Chapter 1, Gretchen. I'd love to tell you the person I am now has nothing to do with the girl I was when I lived in Sandfjord, a quaint port town on the southern tip of Norway. I was born there, a place where the sun glinting on the navy-colored foamy bay made you feel alive, and the crisp air gusting in from the North Sea ensured you never forgot your strong-blooded Nordic roots. And that is The Weight of Night, part of me attempting to connect to the location I live a little bit better. The next book I got from the used bookstore was Andersonville by Mackinlay Kantor. This is something I'm really looking for. I think this was one of my 5-star predictions for my Pulitzer Prize project, in which I want to read every book that won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. This is one of them. It was published, I'm forgetting the year. Oh, it has a map. And as I said, I love a book with a map. Let me find the copyright information and I can tell you. All right, so it's copyright 1955, and there is the map. So this is one of the ones that I've been really looking forward to. It is obviously a very chunky book, and I had been kind of keeping an eye out for it because that's a lot to do on audio, and I'm, as much as possible, I want to try to do my Pulitzer Prize project books in print. This is also a big commitment to get from, say, a library, and try to get, I don't want to make myself feel like I need to adhere to a 2-week window, but copies of the book, like this is priced $26 on the back. So it was something I had been kind of keeping an eye out for at my used bookstore, and they got a copy in, so I grabbed it. So I ended up getting it, instead of $26, I got it for $13. So I got it half price, and it's in pretty good condition. So I'm really excited to have this. Now, the reason I'm so excited about this one is that widely regarded as the most powerful novel ever written about our nation's bloodiest conflict, Mackinlay Kantor's best-selling Andersonville vividly portrays the notorious Confederate prisoner of war camp where 50,000 Union soldiers were held captive and 14,000 died under inhumane conditions. And by the way, this is based on a true story. Based on 25 years of research, Kantor's Pulitzer Prize-winning masterpiece tells the interweaving stories of camp prisoners, commanders, nearby planters and families, and roving bandits, pieced together by the brutal struggle between North and South. I am really excited to get to this book. I think it seems to deal with America's complicated history of race, but mostly from the Civil War angle and the complicated angles of that, even within the Pulitzer Prize, which also awarded Gone with the Wind, which is one of the ones I want to get to next. And I feel like this will be an interesting counterpoint to Gone with the Wind. So it is one that I'm hoping to get to fairly soon, maybe next year. But I am taking a slow approach to my Pulitzer Prize project, as you can tell, since I've only actually read one so far. But anyway, really excited about Andersonville by Mackinlay Kantor. Now we get into the real backless books. These are the ones that were really cheap. There are a bunch of them though. And just for future book haul revisits, I won't feel like I should point out I did not purchase any of these hoping that I would read them immediately or within the next year necessarily. I purchased them because they are books that have been on my radar, things that I'd be interested in having, like library builders, things like that, that I would like to read at some point in the future, and having them on hand will certainly help with that. And also, I really like old vintage book covers, and a lot of these are great for that. The first one is Appointment in Samarra by John O'Hara. John O'Hara wrote the book Butterfield 8, which won, the movie adaptation won Elizabeth Taylor her first Oscar. I have not read it. I remember a couple of years ago I was thinking about doing like a book bucket list, and I didn't quite do it, but part of my research for that was looking into the best books of the 20th century, and this was one that came up consistently on on lists like that, so it had been on my radar for that, and when I found a copy with this nice old-fashioned cover, I had to grab it. The time is the first year of the Great Depression, when a whole society suddenly came down to earth after the long binge of the booming 20s. The place is Gibbsville, Pennsylvania, the town that John O'Hara created and made into an unequaled mirror of American life. The man is Julian English, who had everything: good looks, irresistible charm, social position, fine friends, a beautiful, loving wife, and who was compulsively driven to destroy all he had and was. The result is the finest novel O'Hara ever wrote. Appointment in Samara stands as one of the key achievements of modern American fiction. And the beginning of the book is, our story opens in the middle of Luther L for Leroy, Fliegler, who is lying in his bed, not thinking of anything, but just aware of sounds, conscious of his own breathing, and sensitive to his own heartbeats. That's Appointment in Samara by John O'Hara. Next is Arrowsmith by Sinclair Lewis. This is actually part of my Pulitzer Prize project, so this is something that is kind of on the docket. Probably, maybe not for next year, but it will be something that I get to. And it was $1, and it still has this kind of nice cover. Martin Arrowsmith's singular, if somewhat ascetic, devotion to science affords Sinclair Lewis his most dramatic opportunity to portray an American whose work becomes his life. Forced to give up successive sinecures, instructor in medicine, small-town doctor, research pathologist, by obstacles ranging from public ignorance to the publicity-mindedness of a great foundation, Arrowsmith becomes virtually isolated as a seeker after truth. Even so, Lewis's poignant thesis would seem to be that American idealism cannot beget true tragedy because its adherents lack a sympathetic audience and their stumbling blocks are, for the most part, petty. That's Arrowsmith by Sinclair Lewis, and it opens... The driver of the wagon swaying through forest and swamp of the Ohio wilderness was a ragged girl of 14. Her mother they had buried near the Monongahela. The girl herself had heaped with torn sods the grave beside the river of the beautiful name. Next, we have Saul Bellow's Humboldt's Gift. Saul Bellow is an author I have not read before, but he's kind of been on my radar. He's going to come up again when we get a little further in. This is another one with a really crazy vintage cover, which I love. This is also his Pulitzer Prize winning novel, so this is on my Pulitzer Prize project, and it is something that I will be getting to as part of that at some point, and it was only $1. Even better. Never has Saul Bellow's unsurpassed genius for creating full-blooded characters been so penetrating, so charged with exuberant vitality as in Humboldt's Gift. Here, Renata, all-woman and then some, Ronaldo, junior league mafioso tough, and Charlie, living legend with a frenzied past, live out destinies complicated by the unforgettable Humboldt. And Humboldt, drinker, lover, sometimes bum, and lifetime shadow of Charlie Citrine, plots a dubious revenge for services rendered in the name of friendship. And the book begins. The Book of Ballads, published by von Humboldt Fletcher in the 30s, was an immediate hit. Humboldt was just what everyone had been waiting for. Out in the Midwest, I had certainly been waiting eagerly, I can tell you that. And let's leave it there. That is Humboldt's Gift by Saul Bellow, Pulitzer Prize winner. Next is another Pulitzer Prize winner this one was $1.98. It's The Executioner's Song by Norman Mailer. This is another one that I've been really thinking about because it's a hefty book. It is, 1,024 pages. So I've been trying to think about how I'm going to read it, and this seems like a good option because, again, it's only the print is not that large, and it's a sturdy book and easy to carry around, not too heavy. I think that's going to be good, and it has a bit of a vintage cover feel, which is great. Now, this does not have a plot description on the back, but my memory of it is that it involves a true story. Jamie is trying to dig into the couch behind me. So, here's a description. What is the value of a single life? She's going to continue digging into the couch. In answer to that ageless cry, that agonizing question, Norman Mailer tells the story of Gary Gilmore, convicted murderer who was executed in January 1977. He recreates Gilmore's tormented world from the recorded testimonies of his lover Nicole and those of his friends, relatives, employers, victims, as well as policemen, detectives, prison guards, judges, lawyers, psychiatrists, journalists. It is a story of 9 haunted months that doomed interval of time between Gilmore's release on parole from prison until his senseless killings delivered him to his final hour. It is a tale of violence and fear, jealousy and loss, of a love that was defiant even in death. And the book begins. Part 1, Gary. Chapter 1, the first day. Brenda was 6 when she fell out of the apple tree. She climbed to the top and the limb with the good apples broke off. Gary caught her as the branch came scraping down. They were scared. The apple trees were their grandmother's best crop, and it was forbidden to climb in the orchard. It's The Executioner's Song by Norman Mailer, Pulitzer Prize winner. Then we get to a couple of Sue Grafton books. I've mentioned that I have gaps in my physical collection of Sue Grafton books that I need to fill in, and I got a couple of them, including, thankfully, the one that I need next. G is for Gumshoe. Really, I'm not going to run through the plots for these, but I'm really excited to have this continue my rereads of Sue Grafton working up to the end. And I also got H is for Homicide. They did not have IJK, but they did have L is for Lawless, and I'm really excited to have these. They don't match the ones that I have, which does bother me a little bit, but they do kind of have that fun vintage flair. There's G is for Gumshoe. Kinsey Milhone drives a Volkswagen Beetle in the original books. I think this is the book where she loses that Volkswagen Beetle. Here's H is for Homicide, and L is for Lawless. They don't match the ones I have, but they do have a kind of fun flair to them, so I'm okay with that. Then there are some Agatha Christie ones. The first is the 7 Dials mystery. I love this vintage cover once again. Sir Oswald and Lady Coote had rented Chimneys, an imposing old country estate, for the season. The lease did not include murder, yet in a weekend 2 men were found dead on the magnificent grounds. A missing alarm clock, a stolen document, and an unfinished love letter provide the clues to the 7 Dials mystery. They traditionally don't have a lot of Agatha Christie books. At my used bookstore, I think there's a lot of just turnover in her books because people tend to like them. I've mentioned several times recently that I am not a huge fan of the current mode of mystery thrillers where there's a lot of psychological suspense, unreliable narrators, and things like that try to trick you and have a lot of twists and turns and they don't really make sense. So it's made me really long for classic whodunits and things like that. So I turned to Agatha Christie, and they actually had a lot of her books. So I was able to pick and choose through them. Most of the ones that they had were Hercule Poirot books, and I would rather have Miss Marple. That's just me. I'm not a huge Hercule Poirot fan. This seems to be one outside of both of those series. So I grabbed it up, and it'll be fun to have it on my shelf for only $1 for whenever I get to it. And then I used to own a copy of And Then There Were None, and I don't anymore. Don't know what happened to my copy. So they had one for $1.75. Picked it up. Cover's a little bit problematic. Reflects the original title of the book, which was 10 Little Indians. But it's a book that I like, and it is a vintage cover, even if it's a little weird. So, if you're unfamiliar, one by one, the guests arrived at the mansion on Indian Island, summoned by a mysterious host, and one by one, with a terrifying meticulousness, they were stalked by a cunning murderer. Utterly baffling, and yet there was a pattern, concealed in a nursery rhyme hanging over the fireplace. I remember being a big fan of this book. I haven't read it since I was a teenager, so it'll be fun to go back. Oh, there's a cast of characters in the beginning. That makes me happy. And it begins, I'll go back and do a beginning of the Seven Dials mystery. In the corner of a first-class smoking carriage, Mr. Justice Wargrave, lately retired from the bench, puffed at a cigar and ran an interested eye through the political news in the Times. And then there were none. Let's do the first sentence of the Seven Dials mystery, because I completely forgot about that. Chapter 1, on early rising. That amiable youth, Jimmy Thesiger, came racing down the big staircase at Chimneys, 2 steps at a time. So precipitate was his descent that he collided with Treadwell, the stately butler, just as the latter was crossing the hall bearing a fresh supply of hot coffee. Uh-oh, somebody's gonna get in trouble. One more Agatha Christie, it's Death on the Nile. Now, this is a Hercule Poirot book, but I decided to do it because there is a movie adaptation coming out, and I'm not too keen on it because I really didn't like the adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express that came out recently, and it's all the same. Well, the same creator, Kenneth Branagh. So I don't have high hopes for it, but that does make me curious about the book. So here it is, again, only $1. The scene: a cruise in the land of the ancient pharaohs. The victim: she made such a lovely bride. Alas, a tiny round bullet hole just above her right ear had interrupted what seemed to be a perfect honeymoon. The suspects: the boat was crawling with them, including the ex-girlfriend of the groom who said she just came along for the ride, and the groom himself who had at least a couple of dozen million motives for murder. And there's a $sign after motives. The clues: a dainty pearl-handled revolver, a string of stolen pearls, and an initial scrawled in blood. The solution: even the great Hercule Poirot couldn't put the pieces together in time to prevent the murderer from striking again. And it has that lovely vintage cover. Let's do the opening of this. Part 1, England. Lynette Ridgway. That's her, said Mr. Burnaby, the landlord of the 3 Crowns. He nudged his companion. And that finishes Agatha Christie. The only book that's left is another one for $1, but it's not a mass market. It also has a vintage cover. It's Saul Bellow's The Adventures of Augie March. I used to have a copy of this in the Penguin Great Books of the 20th Century collection that they did somewhere around the year 2000. Don't know what happened to it. I don't have it anymore. But it was one that I had been really looking forward to and never got around to reading, so they had this for $1 in their discounted section, and I snapped it up. Ranging from the depths of poverty to the heights of success and back, this is the sprawling chronicle of a modern-day Columbus in search of reality and fulfillment. I've heard good things about it. Saul Bellow is an author I've wanted to read for a very long time. Chapter 1. I am an American, Chicago-born. Chicago, that somber city, and go at things as I have taught myself, freestyle, and will make the record in my own way. First to knock, first admitted, sometimes an innocent knock, sometimes a not-so-innocent. And that is The Adventures of Augie March by Saul Bellow. And that concludes this large November book haul. I got to cool it a little bit for December because, this was a lot. Even though most of them are $1, these things add up. I spent almost all of the credit that I earned trading stuff in. So it's going to be a lean December in terms of a book haul. But I got all these. I'm really excited about all of them. I'd love to hear your feedback if you've read any of these, if you have thoughts or recommendations based on these. And as always, I really appreciate your time. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.